The desert wind did not just blow. It scoured the earth, carrying grit that stung the skin and obscured the horizon. Samson's mother stood against the gale, shielding her face, when the air suddenly grew still. The heat shimmered, and the messenger appeared, not walking from the dunes, but standing as if he had always been there. He did not speak of ordinary things. He spoke of a life set apart. "He is a Nazarite," the messenger declared. "His hair shall never be shorn, for in that length lies the source of his purpose." The mother stood motionless, the sand swirling around her feet as the weight of the words took hold. The messenger vanished as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving only the relentless desert wind and the echo of the vow. She pressed her hands to her stomach, feeling the truth of the prophecy settle deep within her. The destiny of a man had begun. Years passed, and the desert boy became a man who walked the world with a heavy, deliberate stride. Samson entered the valley of Timnah alone, the sun beating down on the rocky slopes, casting long, sharp shadows across the path. The air was thick with the scent of dry grass and heat. He was scanning the horizon when the silence of the valley broke. A young lion erupted from the brush, a blur of tawny muscle and hunger. It lunged, jaws wide, teeth bared to strike. Samson did not retreat. He braced his feet against the loose shale, the ground shifting under his weight. As the beast collided with him, he caught the creature by its mane, his fingers locking into the thick fur like iron hooks. The lion thrashed, its claws raking the air, but Samson held firm. He planted his heels, twisted his torso, and exerted a force that defied the natural order of the wild. The struggle ended as abruptly as it began. The carcass hit the dust with a heavy, final thud. Samson stood over the remains, his chest heaving. The Philistine army filled the valley of Lehi, a sea of bronze and iron that blocked every exit. They moved with the confidence of a force that had already won, their spears leveled, their voices rising in a mocking chant. Samson stood in the center, his hands empty, his posture relaxed. The commanders laughed, seeing no sword, no shield, no armor. They surged forward, expecting an easy capture. Samson did not wait for the impact. He dropped to one knee, his hands sweeping through the dry, cracked earth, until his fingers closed around the bleached jawbone of a donkey. It was brittle, sun-bleached, and jagged. He rose, the bone gripped tight in his fist, and met the first wave. The sound of the bone striking bone was sharp and rhythmic. He moved through the ranks like a storm through wheat. Men fell before they could raise their spears. The laughter died, replaced by panic. When the dust finally settled, 1,000 men lay motionless. Samson stood alone, the jawbone heavy in his hand. The Philistine lords gathered in a dim chamber, their voices low as they counted out heavy gold coins. They pushed the pile toward Delilah, the metal clinking with a promise of wealth that eclipsed any loyalty. She watched the coins settle, her expression unreadable, and accepted the burden of their request. The trap was set. When Samson arrived, the house was quiet, the air inside cool and still. Delilah moved with a measured grace, guiding him to a seat. She sat close, her fingers tracing the lines of his arms, feeling the dense, corded muscle beneath the skin. She did not look at his face, but at the power that had broken armies. "What is the secret of your might?" she whispered. Samson laughed, the sound echoing against the stone walls. He leaned back, his eyes scanning the shadows, and offered a casual lie. Delilah watched him, her gaze sharpening. She took the bowstrings she had hidden nearby and bound his wrists, pulling the knots tight. The days bled into one another, each marked by the same rhythmic, probing questions. Delilah did not tire. She did not raise her voice. She simply existed in the space beside him, a constant, low-frequency pressure that wore down his defenses. She brought him food, she poured his wine, and she asked again. Every time he lied, she tested the claim, and every time the bonds failed, she returned to the quiet, insistent hum of her inquiry. Her fingers moved over his skin, with a deliberate, searching touch that felt less like affection and more like an excavation. Samson began to feel the weight of the game. The air in the room grew heavy, stagnant with the scent of unwashed stone. One evening, The exhaustion finally caught him. He rested his head in her lap. She did not stop. She leaned down, her breath warm against his ear, and whispered the question one more time. The resistance dissolved. He spoke the truth. If my hair is cut, my strength leaves me. The room went deathly still. Delilah waited until his breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of a heavy sleep. She signaled the guard. A man stepped from the shadows, a razor gripped in his hand. He knelt, the blade scraping against the scalp. The long, thick locks fell away, hitting the floor in silent clumps. The secret was gone. Delilah stood and signaled again. The room filled with the metallic clatter of armor. Samson woke to the sound of steel. He lunged upward. His muscles, once capable of tearing lions, felt thin and hollow. He swung his arms, but the air offered no resistance. The Philistines swarmed him, pinning his limbs to the floor. They bound his wrists with heavy iron chains. A soldier stepped forward, holding a rod heated until it glowed white. The iron pressed into his eyes. They hauled him to his feet, dragging him toward the door, leaving the room behind as he stumbled into a life of total darkness. The prison of Gaza smelled of damp earth and rotting grain. Samson moved in a circle, his feet dragging through the dust, his hands locked onto the heavy wooden handle of the millstone. Every step was a labor. He pushed. The stone groaned against the floor, and the grain crushed beneath it. Day bled into night, marked only by the rhythm of his own breathing and the distant, mocking laughter of the guards. His body, once a weapon, was now a machine of endless, hollow repetition. He was a beast of burden, his strength reduced to the simple act of walking in a circle. In the silence of his cell, when the guards retreated and the heavy iron door slammed shut, he slumped against the rough stone wall. His hand drifted upward, fingers tracing the jagged, uneven surface of his scalp. He paused. The skin was no longer smooth. He felt the coarse, sharp prickle of hair beneath his fingertips. He rubbed the spot, his breath hitching in the dark. It was growing. The darkness remained, but the weight in his chest shifted. A flicker of something long forgotten, a cold, sharp edge of purpose, began to stir in the silence. The temple of Dagon hummed with the sound of 1,000 voices. Samson stood in the center, his eyes sightless, his body marked by the scars of his captivity. The guards shoved him forward, forcing him between two massive stone pillars that held the weight of the roof. The crowd roared, a wave of sound that crashed against him. Stones struck his shoulders and chest, stinging his skin, but he did not flinch. He reached out, his palms finding the rough, cold texture of the stone. He leaned his forehead against the pillar, the surface biting into his skin. The laughter grew louder, mocking his weakness. In the sudden, focused silence of his own mind, he whispered, "Lord, one last time." He planted his feet, digging his heels into the marble floor. He gripped the pillars, his fingers locking into the crevices of the rock. He shoved. The stone groaned, a low, grinding sound that vibrated through his arms and into his chest. He pushed harder, his muscles corded and straining. The foundation beneath his feet trembled. A hairline fracture appeared in the base of the pillar, spiderwebbing outward. The structure shivered. The stone gave way with a sound like a mountain splitting in two. Samson did not let go. He drove his weight forward, his feet sliding through the debris as the pillars buckled. Dust erupted from the floor, choking the air, turning the temple into a blinding gray chaos. Above, the massive roof beams groaned, the wood splintering under the impossible stress. Then, the center gave way. A thunderous roar swallowed the screams of the crowd as the ceiling descended. It was a slow, terrifying descent at first, then a sudden, crushing plunge of stone and timber. Samson felt the weight of the world collapse onto his shoulders, but he did not pull back. He pushed until the very end. The temple floor vanished beneath the falling rubble. Stones smashed against stone, burying the laughter, the pride, and the man in a single, final mountain of ruin. The air grew still. The dust settled over the broken remains of the temple, coating the ground in a thick gray shroud. No movement stirred beneath the debris. The legend was sealed in the silence of the desert. A total, absolute end to to the man who had torn lions and armies apart with his hands. The wind returned to the valley, sweeping over the grave of the temple.